I can still remember the first time I picked up a spatula. I was 7 years old, standing on a wobbly stool in my mother's kitchen, fascinated by the swirl of pancake batter. My mother laughed as I splattered a few drops on the floor, but her eyes shone with pride. Those early days sparked an unshakable passion inside me. From then on, I saw every recipe as a gateway to a new adventure. My parents never discouraged me, but they were always busy with their own lives. My 2 older brothers, Daniel and Mark, were the ones who really shaped my self-esteem. They were the cool kids, athletic, outgoing, and popular in school. Whenever I mentioned my dream of becoming a chef, they'd snicker and say, "Come on, be serious. Chefs don't make real money. Why not become a doctor or a lawyer?" Their dismissive words hurt more than I let on. To them, cooking was a silly hobby that would never pay the bills. Yet even at that young age, I felt something special stirring within me. I knew I had a gift. The kitchen became my safe place, a canvas where I could express myself without judgment, at least for a little while. I remember one particular family dinner when I was 10. My mom had assigned me a small task: make the mashed potatoes. It was the first time I was entrusted with something beyond simple stirring. I took the job seriously, carefully peeling each potato and boiling them to just the right tenderness. I added a bit of butter, a dash of salt, and even a pinch of garlic powder for extra flavor. When the meal was ready, I sat with anticipation, waiting to see everyone's reaction. My father gave me a polite nod, but Daniel and Mark erupted in laughter. "Garlic in mashed potatoes? That's weird," Daniel teased. "It's okay," Mark chimed in. "It's not like you'll be feeding anyone important. It's just us." My pride deflated in an instant. I had hoped for at least a nod of approval, but instead, I got mockery. I felt the sting of tears welling up in my eyes, but I forced them back, determined not to let my brothers see me cry. That night, I vowed to keep my culinary aspirations to myself. If they couldn't appreciate my tiny culinary experiments now, maybe one day I'd show them something unforgettable. As the years went by, I honed my cooking skills in secret. Late at night, when the house was quiet, I'd tiptoe to the kitchen. Armed with a cookbook borrowed from the library, I'd try out recipes I read about during the day. I found a thrill in mixing unknown spices, testing various sauces, and perfecting my technique. Sometimes things went very wrong, like the time I tried to flambe bananas and nearly set off the smoke alarm. Other times, I pulled off amazing dishes that rivaled anything on a restaurant menu, or so I believed. And in those small hours, when no one was watching, I allowed myself to dream. I imagined running my own restaurant, hearing customers rave about my food, and seeing the sign with my name in bright lights. During the day, though, I reverted to my quiet self. I went through the motions of school, completed my homework, and endured my brother's teasing. They mostly ignored me unless they wanted to crack jokes about me playing house with pots and pans. I refused to give up, but their ridicule weighed on my heart. The gap between my secret passion and their public scorn grew wider every day. In 9th grade, I discovered a flyer for a school cooking contest pinned to the cafeteria bulletin board. My heart raced at the thought of finally showcasing my skills. The contest required participants to create one main dish and one dessert. I signed up without hesitation, partly excited and partly terrified. For weeks, I practiced relentlessly, perfecting every detail of my chosen recipes: a creamy mushroom risotto and a light lemon mousse. I spent countless nights in the kitchen, adjusting flavors and timing. My mother noticed the intensity in my eyes. She quietly supported me by buying the best ingredients she could afford, though we never spoke openly about it. When the big day arrived, I carried my ingredients to school in a cooler, my hands shaking with nerves. My brothers rolled their eyes when they found out. "Really? A cooking contest?" Daniel sneered. Mark shrugged. "Better than doing nothing, I guess." Despite their snide remarks, I kept my head high. Stepping into the competition, I saw other students' creations and felt intimidated. But the moment I started cooking, my confidence soared. This was my domain. It was time to show everyone, especially myself, what I was capable of. The aroma of fresh herbs filled the gymnasium as contestants cooked their dishes. My risotto simmered, absorbing the broth while I gently stirred, never leaving it unattended. My dessert rested in the refrigerator, waiting for the finishing touch of whipped cream and lemon zest. After what felt like an eternity, the judges started their tasting rounds. Their faces lit up when they tried my risotto. They whispered to one another, nodding in approval. Then came the dessert. They raised their eyebrows at the first spoonful, clearly impressed by the tangy sweetness. I felt a surge of pride like never before. When the results were announced, I stood there, stunned. I had won first place. My classmates clapped politely, and the teacher handed me a small trophy. For a moment, it felt like the entire universe was celebrating with me. But when I spotted Daniel and Mark at the back of the gym, they were anything but thrilled. They wore matching expressions of irritation, as if my victory somehow embarrassed them. As I looked into the crowd, I noticed they left before I could share my excitement. That bittersweet moment planted a seed of determination in my heart. My dream was worth pursuing, with or without my brother's support. After the contest, I hurried home, eager to show my trophy to my parents and bask in even a drop of familial pride. My father was neutral as always, but my mother smiled and congratulated me, taking a moment to pat my shoulder. I hoped for more, but I felt grateful for her small gesture. When my brothers walked in, I tried to give them the exciting news. "Hey, I actually won the cooking contest at school." My voice trembled with a mix of pride and anxiety. Daniel shrugged, hardly looking at me, while Mark offered a half smile that was more sarcastic than genuine. "That's cool," Mark said, "but it's just a school thing, right? You know, real chefs have to cook under serious pressure. You wouldn't last a day in a real kitchen." Daniel jumped in. "Yeah, restaurants are tough. And the pay? Don't even get me started." Their words felt like knives slicing through my newfound confidence. With every jab, I felt my victory slip away, overshadowed by their cynicism. I wanted to scream that I had talent, that I could handle the stress, and that someday I would prove them wrong. But I stayed quiet, holding on to my trophy as a fragile symbol of my worth. High school flew by faster than I imagined. Soon, it was my senior year, and everyone around me was buzzing about their next steps: college, jobs, or traveling. My heart was set on culinary school, but I dreaded telling my family. I feared my brother's ridicule and my parents' concern about the financial burden. During a tense family dinner, my father asked each of us about our plans. Daniel boasted about his acceptance into a prestigious business program. Mark declared he wanted to go pre-med. I spoke softly. "I'm hoping to go to culinary school." The room went silent. My father set down his fork, my mother paused with a half smile, and my brothers exchanged smirks. "You've got to be kidding," Mark snorted. "You know how expensive that is?" "For what? Learning how to flip burgers?" Daniel chimed in. "Even if you graduate, does that guarantee success? You might just end up as a line cook forever." I felt the heat rising in my cheeks. Anger, shame, and betrayal mixed like a toxic recipe inside me. Despite the humiliation, I forced myself to look up. "I'm serious about this. It's what I want." Their response was stony silence, heavy with disapproval. But I vowed to press on. Despite my brother's scoffing, I applied to several culinary institutions. My grades were decent, but it was my passion that shone through in my application essays. To my delight, I received an acceptance letter from a reputable culinary school in a neighboring city. I remember opening that envelope in my bedroom, my heart thumping like a drum. The acceptance felt like a golden ticket to the life I'd always imagined. I clutched the letter, my thoughts racing about the next steps: moving away, tuition costs, classes, and new challenges. My excitement mingled with dread because I knew my family's reactions would be mixed at best. I mustered the courage to share the news at dinner. "I got in," I said, trying not to sound too excited. My mother's eyes brimmed with pride, but she also looked worried. My father offered a curt nod. "Well, that's good," he said, "but can we afford it?" My shoulders tensed. Before I could answer, Daniel muttered under his breath, "Waste of money," and Mark rolled his eyes. I decided then and there, no matter how alone I felt, I wouldn't back down. This was my dream, and I intended to make it a reality, even if I had to scrape together every penny myself. To finance my culinary education, I worked any odd job I could find, washing dishes at a local diner, delivering groceries, even mowing lawns in the summer heat. I was determined not to rely too heavily on my parents, who were already juggling finances for Daniel and Mark's expensive college ambitions. Exhaustion became my constant companion. During the day, I went to school, And in the evenings, I raced to my dishwashing shift. Often, I stumbled into bed after midnight, only to wake up at dawn to study. My social life shrank to near nothing, but I reminded myself of my ultimate goal. Every tip, every small paycheck in my hand felt like another step toward the life I wanted. Meanwhile, Daniel and Mark continued to belittle me. They teased me for smelling like dishwater or for coming home with soaked shoes from an unexpected kitchen spill. "Is this really worth it?" they'd ask. There's no glory in being a dishwasher. But I refused to let their words break me. If anything, their scorn fueled my resolve. I was doing honest work, preparing for something greater, and that promise kept me going through my toughest days. The day I moved into the dorm at culinary school felt surreal. I packed my modest belongings into the back of my battered old car. My mother gave me a tight hug, whispering, "We believe in you," even if her voice shook with concern. My father patted my shoulder in a rare show of affection. As for my brothers, they were conspicuously absent. The campus buzzed with excitement as new students unloaded their dreams alongside pots and pans. I felt both thrilled and intimidated by the gleaming kitchens, the array of exotic ingredients, and the promise of competition. Everyone here was passionate, talented, and most importantly, determined to succeed. I realized that for the first time in my life, I was surrounded by people who shared my obsession with perfect flavor and presentation. Classes began early each morning, covering everything from knife skills to sauce making. After years of practicing alone in my kitchen, I was finally among peers. Yet the workload was intense. My fingers ached from chopping vegetables for hours, and my arms trembled from whisking cream to the right consistency. But each lesson filled me with a sense of wonder. Every day, I grew sure that I'd chosen the right path. Midway through my first semester, I called home, eager to share how much I was learning. I described how I had mastered the art of making the perfect bechamel sauce and how thrilling it was to create new flavor combinations. My mother sounded pleased, though she mostly listened. My father seemed wary but offered a gruff, "Good job." Then Daniel took the phone, and I felt my enthusiasm dip. "Hey," he said, his voice flat. "Heard you're chopping onions all day. Having fun?" The sarcasm dripped off every word. I tried to brush it off and tell him about my upcoming midterm exam, a full menu presentation. "Cool," he replied. "Just don't burn anything." Next was Mark's turn. "The medical program is hard," he began, "but at least I'll have a real job. How about you?" His tone was dismissive, as if my career choice was a phase I'd outgrow. That call ended on a sour note, but it fueled me to push harder. I felt more determined than ever to excel at school. If they wouldn't acknowledge my drive and talent, I'd make them see it someday. For our midterm, each student had to create a 3-course meal: appetizer, entree, and dessert. The pressure was intense. We'd be graded on creativity, technique, and flavor. I planned a roasted tomato soup with basil oil, pan-seared salmon with lemon butter sauce, and a dark chocolate mousse with raspberry coulis. I arrived at the test trembling with anticipation. Knives clinked, pots boiled, and the entire kitchen buzzed with focused energy. The appetizer and entree went smoothly. My soup was velvety and the salmon was perfectly cooked. Then disaster struck. When I moved to garnish my mousse, I fumbled the piping bag. It slipped from my hand, sending a spray of raspberry coulis across my workstation and across my plate, turning my dessert into a splattered mess. My heart sank. I tried to salvage it, but time was up. The professor tasted my dessert, arching an eyebrow at the haphazard presentation. I received a stern critique, my final grade tumbling. It felt like a personal failure. All that practice and dedication reduced to a single embarrassing moment. For days, I couldn't shake the humiliation, but I forced myself to see it as a lesson. Real kitchens can be chaotic, and real chefs adapt. I'd learned to adapt too. Feeling the sting of my midterm mishap, I dreaded my upcoming classes. One afternoon, I was quietly perfecting my chicken stock in a practice lab when Chef Miranda, one of the school's most respected instructors, approached me. "I've noticed your technique," she said. "You have a natural feel for flavors. Don't let one bad day define you." Her words felt like a life raft in turbulent waters. She was known for being strict and rarely offered praise. That single moment of validation reignited my spark. I began volunteering for extra shifts in the student-run restaurant on campus, logging hours in the prep kitchen and helping with events whenever possible. Chef Miranda would swing by occasionally, offering tips or quick lessons on plating and timing. Little by little, my confidence returned. I realized that cooking was about resilience. Every dish, every day, was a chance to start fresh. My classmates formed a supportive circle around me, as went well, encouraging each other through late-night study sessions and nerve-wracking exams. For the first time, I experienced what it felt like to be surrounded by people who believed in my passion, rather than mocking it. Amid my improving spirits, I received a phone call from Daniel. He spoke in urgent tones. "Dad's sick," he announced. My stomach dropped. I asked for details, and Daniel explained that our father had suffered a minor heart attack. He was stable but hospitalized. I packed my things and rushed home immediately. When I arrived, I found my father looking frail in his hospital bed. My mother was worn with worry, and Mark hovered anxiously. I spent hours talking with Dad, reassuring him that everything would be all right. During a quiet moment in the waiting room, Mark suddenly told me, "So about that money you've been saving for tuition, we might need it for Dad's medical bills." I felt my chest tighten. I'd worked so hard for that tuition fund. "But that's all I have," I replied softly. Mark gave me a cold stare. "We're family, aren't we? Isn't Dad's life more important than some fancy culinary school?" I felt torn apart. Of course I cared about Dad's health. But the dismissive tone, the assumption that my dreams were meaningless compared to their needs, felt like betrayal. In that moment, I realized how far they'd go to hold me back. I spent the next few days in turmoil, torn between my loyalty to family and my commitment to my future. My father's health improved slightly, which brought me some relief. Still, the financial burden on my parents was overwhelming. I wanted to help. I truly did. But I also feared derailing my education, just as I was hitting my stride. Daniel and Mark made it worse by constantly dropping hints about how selfish it would be to keep my tuition money. They threw guilt-inducing phrases at me. "We're all sacrificing for Dad," or "It's not like you can't just go back to culinary school later." Their words stung. They had never respected my dream, and now they were using our father's situation as leverage. Desperate, I spoke to my mother. She was torn too, not wanting to pressure me, but also needing help. "Only you can decide," she whispered, her eyes full of sorrow. Ultimately, I made a painful compromise. I gave a portion of my savings for Dad's medical bills, keeping just enough to cover the next semester's tuition. It wasn't easy. I felt both guilt and resentment swirling in my heart, but I had no choice. Family came first, even if it cost me dearly. When I returned to culinary school, my mind was flooded with worry. My father's health remained fragile, and the rest of my tuition lay in a precarious balance. I found it hard to concentrate in class, often drifting into thoughts of home and the chilling memory of Mark's words. Chef Miranda noticed my lack of focus. After a lab session, she pulled me aside. "Your work has been sloppy lately," she said, her tone firm but not unkind. "Tell me what's going on." At first, I hesitated to open up. However, the genuine concern in her eyes coaxed the truth out of me. I explained my father's situation and the financial strain. She offered a sympathetic nod. "Life doesn't pause for our ambitions," she said softly, "but you must find a way to keep going if this is truly your passion. Don't let adversity snuff out your talent." Her words sparked renewed determination in me. I resolved to not just survive but excel, despite everything weighing on me. Somehow, I managed to channel my frustrations into the kitchen, perfecting each dish with razor-sharp focus. Cooking became my therapy, my refuge, and the one place where I felt a semblance of control. A few weeks later, I was working at the student-run restaurant, prepping dinner service. As I julienned carrots, I sensed someone watching me. Turning, I saw Brian, one of the top students in our program. We hadn't spoken much before, but I admired his skill and confidence in the kitchen. "That's a neat technique," he said, nodding at my precise cuts. "Are you free after service? I'd like to chat." His request caught me off guard. Brian was known for being reserved, almost aloof, but that evening he offered to buy me a coffee, and I accepted. Over steaming mugs, he admitted he'd overheard bits of my conversation with Chef Miranda and wanted to help. He told me about a part-time position at a high-end restaurant downtown, where he worked weekends as a line cook. They needed another set of hands. The pay was better than any student job on campus. "I know you're dealing with financial stress," he said, "and you're talented. It's a win-win if you're up for it." My eyes lit up at the opportunity. I agreed to apply. In that moment, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe there was a way to handle both my family obligations and my education without giving up on my dreams. Getting the job at La Belle Cuisine was a dream come true, and a nightmare all at once. The executive chef, a stern man named Chef Auguste, wasted no time testing my limits. The kitchen was a frenzy of shouts, sizzling pans, and clanging dishes. Orders piled up in rapid succession, and I had to work at lightning speed while maintaining perfect technique. I started on prep duty, cleaning vegetables, portioning meats, and organizing ingredients. My first weekend shift left me so exhausted that I nearly fell asleep on the late train back to campus. But there was a rush I felt in that kitchen, a collective drive to create culinary magic under immense pressure. Chef Auguste rarely praised anyone, but on my third shift, he looked over my neatly chopped herbs and said, "Not bad." I nearly jumped for joy at that tiny compliment. Over time, I worked my way up from prep to assisting the station chefs with plating and seasoning. Each success boosted my confidence, and each mistake taught me humility. Though I was often dead on my feet, I found renewed determination. The intensity of a real kitchen reminded me why I chose this path. Even amidst the chaos, I felt alive. Just as I was settling into a grueling but rewarding routine, balancing culinary school, weekend shifts at La Belle Cuisine, and occasional calls home, I got an unexpected text from Mark. "We need to talk. Call me ASAP." My heart sank. I had a bad feeling. When I called, Mark's tone was cold. "Listen, we're short on funds again for Dad's treatment. You have a job now, right? We need you to send us some of your pay." Anger bubbled up inside me. My weekends were consumed by back-breaking kitchen labor, and now Mark expected me to hand over my earnings without a second thought. I explained that I still had tuition and living expenses. He scoffed. "Don't be selfish. We're talking about Dad's health." I felt torn in half. My father's well-being mattered deeply to me, but so did my future. I proposed a smaller amount, something I could manage without sabotaging my tuition. Mark became furious, accusing me of caring more about fancy food than our father. The conversation ended in an ugly argument, leaving me shaken. That night, I barely slept, haunted by guilt and resentment. My own brothers saw me as nothing but a financial resource, ignoring the sacrifice I'd already made. Over the next few weeks, stress took a toll on me. My cooking at school was rushed, and my performance at La Belle Cuisine started slipping. One night, after a particularly grueling dinner service, Chef Auguste pulled me aside. "You look like a ghost," he said, his eyes narrowing. "Your cuts are sloppy, and your focus is waning. What's going on?" I stood there, feeling a lump form in my throat. I wanted to tell him everything, the constant pressure from my brothers, the guilt over my father, and the financial strain. But I couldn't form the words. All I managed was, "I'm sorry, Chef, I'm dealing with family problems." He didn't press for details, but offered a curt nod. "Sort it out. Leave your baggage outside the kitchen, or you won't last here." His words were harsh, but not entirely untrue. The drive home was a blur of tears and exhaustion. I stumbled into my dorm, sank onto my bed, and stared at the ceiling. Everything felt hopeless. I wondered if it would be easier to quit, to go home and find a normal job. Yet in the quiet darkness, a tiny voice inside me insisted I hold on. My dream was too precious to abandon. Morning brought a strange sense of calm. After a restless night, I realized I had to make a choice. Continue letting my brothers manipulate me, or stand firm for my own future. I called home again, reaching Mark. In a steady voice, I explained that I would help as much as I could, but I was done with the guilt trips. My tone must have surprised him because he simply said, "Fine," and hung up. I wasn't sure if this new stance would last, but it felt liberating. For the first time, I refused to let my family's demands overshadow my aspirations. I poured my renewed resolve into the kitchen. My next shift at La Belle Cuisine was one of my best. I meticulously prepared every dish, staying calm even during the peak rush. Chef Auguste raised an eyebrow in approval. "Better," he said. That single word felt like a standing ovation to me. At school, I tackled my assignments with fresh energy. I stayed late after class to practice intricate plating techniques. The stress was still there. My father's health was precarious, and my finances remained tight. But I clung to my dream like a lifeline. Defiance was the spark keeping me afloat. My performance at La Belle Cuisine improved so much that I started picking up extra shifts. Chef Auguste let me move from salads to the appetizer station, a step closer to the entree line. This progression also meant better pay, which helped me cover bills and still send a modest amount home. Word of my budding talent spread around campus. A few classmates jokingly asked if I could get them a spot at the restaurant. Meanwhile, Brian, who'd gotten me the initial job lead, continued to mentor me. We'd exchange recipe ideas and tips on coping with the intensity of professional kitchens. He became a genuine friend, something I'd rarely experienced. Back home, news of my small successes must have reached Daniel and Mark. One evening, Daniel called out of the blue. "Heard you're making quite a name for yourself," he began, his tone unsettlingly sweet. I braced myself for another demand, but instead he said, "Actually, I might swing by your place next week. I have a business meeting in your city. Maybe we can grab lunch." I wasn't sure what to make of it. Genuine curiosity or a new angle for mocking me? Despite my reservations, I agreed. Part of me longed for their approval, even if I doubted their intentions. Daniel arrived on a sunny afternoon and insisted on visiting La Belle Cuisine for lunch. I felt both proud and anxious, leading him through the sleek dining room with its pristine white tablecloths and glimmering chandeliers. My co-workers shot curious glances our way. Daniel appeared impressed at first, though he tried to hide it. I introduced him to Chef Auguste, who nodded politely. "Your brother's an asset here," Chef said, surprising me with rare praise. Daniel offered a stiff smile, but I could sense the gears turning in his head. When we sat down, he scanned the menu. "Pricey," he commented. "People really pay this much for fancy food?" I felt my stomach twist. He was searching for a weakness, a way to belittle what I did. Despite his snark, he ordered a full 3-course meal. As he tasted each dish, his face revealed genuine enjoyment, even if he tried to mask it with casual shrugs. After lunch, Daniel said, "This place is good. You're lucky to have this opportunity." Then he added, "I've been thinking, if you're doing so well, maybe you could help out more with Dad's bills." My chest tightened. His words lacked warmth. It was a demand dressed as a compliment. I couldn't decide if this was progress or simply a new form of manipulation. In the following months, everything reached a fever pitch. My final exams were loomed at culinary school, and the restaurant was short-staffed, requiring me to work more shifts. On top of that, Daniel kept sending texts about money, while Mark remained silent. My father's health took a small turn for the worse, leaving my mother in constant worry. I felt like I was spinning 10 plates in the air. Yet, amid the chaos, my skills soared. My final exam involved designing a complete menu from scratch. I poured my heart into it, drawing inspiration from childhood memories like the garlic mash my brothers mocked all those years ago, this time elevated to a velvety puree with a delicate herb infusion. When Chef Miranda tasted my menu, she broke into a rare smile. "This is exceptional," she said, her eyes bright. At La Belle Cuisine, Chef Auguste gave me the chance to develop a seasonal special, letting me test my creativity on paying customers. The dish was a hit, attracting rave reviews from diners and even local food critics. Suddenly, my name began circulating in culinary circles. I stood on the brink of a dream come true, proof that my passion and persistence could triumph over doubt. Shortly after I graduated from culinary school, I did the unthinkable. I opened a small restaurant of my own. The city was buzzing about the young chef with an inventive menu. I borrowed money from a small local investor who believed in my vision. The place was humble at first, just a cozy space with mismatched chairs and chalkboard menus. But I poured my soul into every dish. On opening night, I glanced up to see Mark and Daniel walk through the door. They looked around, clearly trying to hide their astonishment at the bustling crowd. The table next to them was raving about their meals, and I spotted my brothers exchanging unsure glances. When I went over to greet them, they fumbled with their words. "The food is really good," Mark admitted, almost in disbelief. Daniel looked down, unable to meet my gaze. I recognized their discomfort, but felt no urge to gloat. My success was the best revenge I could have asked for. People were paying to experience my culinary art, something my brothers had deemed worthless. Finally, their mockery had no power over me. I had proven my worth on my own terms. The satisfaction was indescribable, like a perfectly balanced dish, seasoned with justice and served piping hot. This is the story of how I turned years of ridicule into a driving force for my greatest achievements. My brothers' scorn taught me resilience, and for that, I can almost thank them. For anyone facing humiliation or doubt, remember, no mockery can dull a genuine passion. The truest victory and sweetest karma comes when you rise above, guided by your own unwavering determination.